How you doing today, sir?
I'm well, thank you.
First of all, big fan of your work. Thanks. I think I've probably told you that before, and congrats. This is a really, really well done film. How much did you know this? I mean, it's generic, but how much did you know the story prior to getting involved?
None at all. I mean, you know, I knew of Bobby Fischer. I knew that he had become a bit of a recluse, but that's about the extent of it, really.
Well, what's amazing about this story, and I think people, as they watch it, are maybe going to think it's a little fictionalized or Hollywoodized, if you will, is the fact that that match was the center of the world when it was happening.
Absolutely. It seemed like the world stopped and everybody was paying attention, watching television, watching two guys play a game of chess. Yeah, remarkable.
Talk a little bit about how you got involved in the project, and was this a project you went after, or...?
I got a phone call saying that Ed Zwick wanted to see me for one of two roles, and I came in, and initially I read for the role that Peter Sarsgaard ended up playing, which was, you know, it was what it was. Peter, as it turns out, is a ranked chess player, and I don't know anything about the game, so it was pretty cut and dry as to who was going to play which part.
Yeah.
Although oddly, I look a little bit more like Bill Lombardi than Peter does, but it just sort of how it worked out.
No, that's very funny.
Yeah.
As an actor, how has your process changed throughout your career? Do you typically prepare the exact same way? Have you refined the process?
You know, there are some things that I do in the very same way, but actually every time I start a project, it's like I'm doing it for the first time in some ways. There's a whole bag of tricks, I suppose, that actors gain as they do this over the course of time in terms of, you know, ways of preparing that have worked for them before and those that perhaps haven't. With me, if it's a fictional character, I often find myself sketching pictures of what this fictional person could look like, what kinds of clothes they might have, what kind of hairstyle they might have. If it's an historical character, I'll, you know, gather as many photographs of that person as I can. Textually, I write out longhand all of their text and all of the stage directions, just so it has actually physically gone through my mind into my hand onto a piece of paper. And then I just start asking as many questions as I can and read as much as I can about the subject if it happens to be historical. And then, you know, there'll be red flags that pop up periodically. You know, that piece of text that for some reason you're having a really hard time memorizing, or some kind of motivation to do something in the text that the screenwriter has an interest in you doing. And I find that if they're odd, or if they aren't naturally absorbed, that there's something going on that is helpful for me to pay attention to.
With a project like Pawn, when it's based on real life, real people, how much, when you book this role, are you then diving into the period and these characters and trying to know as much as you can, and how much is it just, I'm going to stick to the script?
Well, you kind of have to marry the two. I find that I want to know as much as I can about, in this case, Paul Marshall, who I played in the film, who he was, what he was like, how he sounded, if there are interviews online that I can find. I find all that stuff to be mostly helpful, but there are also oftentimes you can start with what's on the page and work backwards from that and sort of say, okay, this is what the screenwriter is focusing on. Now I have to just basically work backwards from that. Why does he say these things? Oh, he's from this part of the country, or he's, you know, he thinks this way, or he does this for a living, or they sort of tend to come together, because oftentimes you can research something an awful lot and end up not using most of it. In fact, most of the time that's the case. I find out as much as I can about them, and oftentimes most of it isn't going to be included in the film, but you never know. You know, they may write a new scene in the middle of the film that you're shooting, and all the stuff that you thought you weren't going to use all of a sudden comes into play. So,
when you were researching this period characters, was there one thing that really surprised you to learn about him, the time period, this whole story? One that really has stuck with you?
In particular to this story, I knew very little about, as I imagine many people did, what happened to Bobby, you know, and the depth of the state he found himself in towards the end of his life, and the sadness, and basically not being able to be in America anymore, and sort of, you know.
Which, by the way, is crazy,
yeah,
considering what he did. You know, that should be like a lifetime, you know, just saying. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I agree. He said some awful harsh things
too.
At a very vulnerable time in this country's history as well. And a lot of hurtful things to a lot of people over the course of time, and I don't really know how much control he had over those opinions. Or maybe he had complete control and that just was who he was, you know. Madness and genius kind of overlap, or, you know, some people can be a genius and be a terror. Doesn't mean they're mad.
You wonder if he was alive in this period, in terms of growing up at this time, whether or not the medication, you know, he would have been. Because you wonder how much, as you just said, how much could he control it?
Right. Or he, you know, if he had started taking medication as a younger man, he may not have been the chess genius that he was.
That's probably true.
I don't know.
I've definitely seen, and I'm sure you've seen, people on medication, it dims everything.
Yeah, a bit.
Yeah, that creativity spark. What's it been like for you over the last few years, being able to work on such high-profile projects as an actor? And just what is it? Because I'm sure when you got involved and wanted to be an actor, that's the dream. I want to do these kinds of things.
Sure. I mean, you want to work with the best people out there, and, you know, I've had some amazing opportunities in the last number of years to work with people that I considered, you know, heroes of mine, personal heroes, and it just makes you all the more focused, you know, in terms of your own work, and, you know, going through all the notes that you've made and just making sure you've dotted all of your I's and crossed your T's and thought of every possibility once you get in front of them, because, you know, part of you wants to please them, or part of you wants to be able to serve something up for them to knock out of the park, or you know, you want to have a go with the best people out there, and that's been all you can ask for, really, as far as I'm concerned.